So welcome to Okta Workflows Community Meetup. My name is Max. And so a few weeks ago, we hosted an in-person meetup in San Francisco. And so we would like to repeat the same content with the same wonderful speakers so that anyone can learn about workflows. And we will also record this and we'll post on our YouTube playlist. And tomorrow, you'll get a message with a link to the recording and also any resources that we mentioned in this meetup. And so let me present the speakers. So first we'll have Akanksha. She will share about what's coming up in Okta Workflows. Then we'll have Andy. Andy will share how they use workflows at SiriusXM. Dylan will then share how they use Okta Workflows at Stack Solutions. And then Michele will will show an example of using inline hooks with Okta Workflows. Now, before I give them the stage, I do want to share resources that we have for Okta Workflows. And we have a lot of resources, and they sort of tend to be in different places. So that's why I kind of organize everything. And I'm going to actually put this in the chat. Let me put this link. So we do have a page that you can actually click on the links. And I'll include this in the message tomorrow as well. But let me quickly just go over what's available, because again, we have a lot of resources to help you learn. And also what I'm going to do, let me do this. So the first one, we have a forum. We have a community forum where you can post questions. We also have templates on that forum. So you can sort of try flows that community built. And if you have a flow that or a solution that you feel like, other people will find, useful, you can also upload your template there. We have office hours. So every Thursday, we host office hours where you can join and, ask questions. We have Okta Ideas where you can post sort of feature requests and also upvote existing requests from the community. Then we have online meetups, and so that's what we're doing now. And then we host an online meetup, once a month, sometimes 2 a month. We have in-person meetups. We hosted 3 this year, so it's on meetup.com. There is a very active community on the Mac Admin Slack channel, extremely active. You'll post a question and literally within a minute, if not less, you'll get a response usually. There is a smaller community on the Okta Admin Slack channel, and then there is a subreddit it's Okta subreddit, but people do ask workflows questions there. So that's kind of on the community side. On the content side, we've got, of course, the documentation and also the release notes. So I, highly advise you to check out the release notes often, because that's where you can see what has been sort of released and what bugs have been fixed and what's new. So it's definitely an excellent resource to kind of learn what's new. Then we have a large number of knowledge-based articles. So if you go to the community, Okta's community website, and you search, there's just a lot of information. So sometimes to make it easier to find workflows content, you just type in what you're searching for and then just add the workflows at the end. So that will help you kind of find the workflows content. Then we have a YouTube playlist with close to 200 videos about workflows. Then there's a formal training. We also post there's a workflows content on the Okta blog. And then there's also a community blog called imc.blog, where there's a lot of Okta and also workflows content. And on the automation side, so we have a lot of templates inside workflows. So there is a templates tab with a large number of pre-built flows that you can sort of try and use as a starting point. And then, as I said, also we have community templates, and those are on the forum where people from the community upload their solutions. And you can go and download it and can also use it as a starting point. And as I said, if you have a flow that you would like to, contribute to the community, please, it's, you upload the file, the flows, with the short description, and that's all you need. Okay. And that's what I want to share. Again, I put the link in the chat, and then I'll send a link to the page in the message tomorrow, including a link to the recording. And that's it from me. So, and I'm gonna let Akanksha take it from here.
Share my screen. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Akanksha. I'm a product manager here on the Okta Workflows team, and I'm here to give you a look at what the team has been up to and what you can look forward to. So, quick disclaimer that this presentation may have some forward-looking statements that are subject to change. So if you joined us at Octane this year, these slides are going to look very familiar, but this is the big picture view of everything that our team has been working on this year. I'll leave it up for a second. Feel free to take a picture if you like. There's a lot of content on here. But yeah, here's the big picture overview before I go into a little bit more detail on some of these items. So first off, we have the Workflows dedicated infrastructure add-on SKU, a bit of a mouthful, but this is a boon to our heaviest Workflows users. Soon you'll be able to purchase the Sell add-on subscription so that your flows can execute in their own dedicated Kubernetes cluster pool. So this will mean significantly fewer resource contention issues, little to no throttling, and a relaxation of the system limits that apply to the general Workflows population today. We're also happy to announce that Workflows is available for our U.S. Department of Defense customers and their approved mission partners. I don't know if anyone on this call is a federal customer, but we leave this slide up because of all of the ways that we're hardening our security for our federal customers also benefits the rest of our Workflows customers. Recently released in GA is both execution log streaming and the execution history inspector. So with execution log streaming, customers can monitor execution history and performance across all of their flows. So this will provide a holistic view of workflows operations to facilitate better insights and decision making. The Execution History Inspector provides a more detailed self-service view of execution history, surfaces things like reasons for unexpected increases in latency or reasons why a flow might have been throttled or blocked. We're also always adding connectors under our Secure Identity Integrations collection, which is now available in the Okta Integration Network. So we've recently introduced connectors for Splunk, Coupa, Mimecast, and more. And we're always, we're going to be launching more in the coming quarters. So look out for SentinelOne, IBM Cloud, and Snowflake. This is something that we're kind of always working on. We want to make sure that you have the right integrations that you need. So this is an area that Okta is making a lot of investments in. So now on to some items that are in development or will be soon. These features here are about improving the experience for building workflows, and this is all based on your feedback. So, we definitely are taking note of all of the feedback that you give your teams or that you submit through Okta Ideas. So keep it coming. The first is expand and collapse cards. So you'll be able to do this individually or all together to help you clean up your view so you can kind of focus on building the most important parts of your flow. We're also adding onboarding sample flows. So if you're new to workflows, these are pre-built examples that can help you get up and running more quickly. And finally, you can also now duplicate branching cards like if else if, and if error. Our back folder roles and connections are in beta now with expected EA this quarter. This introduces new roles to further secure your automations while safely allowing you to expand your use of workflows beyond just a few trusted admin. So this is combined with the ability to scope a connection for use in a specific folder to make sure that users have exactly the tools that they need to drive your automation journeys forward, but nothing extra. In that same vein of securing your flows, we have sensitive data controls. So this is going to allow you to obfuscate sensitive information from less privileged users without having to turn off your execution history. And also, we're finally kicking off our versioning journey. This is going to be a really long roadmap, but we're starting with audit and revert capabilities. This is to help provide accountability and traceability throughout the lifecycle of your automations. This is going to help support compliance requirements to help provide a comprehensive record of flow modifications for organizations that need to stay audit ready. We also have a number of longer term investments that are not yet represented on our customer facing roadmaps. One of these is to allow integration builders to build integrations with Okta for non-standards based APIs. So this is going to be available to ISVs only in Q1 next year, but in the long term, we intend to release it to customers as well so that you can build those last mile integrations to internal tools or applications that are not yet in the Okta integration network. And that's all that I have for you on the workflows roadmap today. Thanks.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Akanksha. Thank you. All right, Andy.
Great. Thank you. And thanks, Akanksha. That was really great as well. I'm looking forward to the versioning myself. Hi, I'm Andy. I work at SiriusXM. I've been at SiriusXM Pandora for 11 years. I joined the identity team at SiriusXM about 2 years ago. So fairly new to some of the Okta processes, but I've definitely got a grasp of workflows over the past 2 years because of our requirements and some of the automation that we needed to perform. So I'm going to review our 90-day inactivity workflow, kind of give it mostly on the surface level. I'll do a quick demo, which is kind of going to give you kind of an overview of what we're doing, but I'm not going to go through each card or anything like that because it would take days. So what we're trying to work towards, what was our goal? We want to find accounts that haven't logged in over 90 days in both Active Directory and Okta. So it kind of expanded the scope beyond just Okta itself. And for stale accounts, we want to reduce the risk of security risks of accounts that have access to applications that have not been logged into because we just want to keep a tight reduction of accounts that just aren't being used. And we also had, prior to this, a lot of manual processes, help desk, desktop support, doing disablements and inactive processes. And, sometimes we'd find gaps where accounts weren't disabled or they were accidentally disabled and they shouldn't have been. And obviously workflows, as we know, provide more efficiency, accuracy, and they fall into a compliance alignment with their logging. So what we're trying to do for this project was we were automating the detection of inactivity across systems. The two systems I was referring to was Active Directory and Okta, obviously. We have different accounts that have different types. I'll kind of mention a little bit on how we identify types the next slide, I believe. And we wanted to also provide notifications to not only the users themselves, but their managers and HR because they're stakeholders within this as well. We also want to provide reversibility, meaning if we suspend an account, we want to be able to activate it at the same spot that it was before it was suspended, meaning that it has all of the applications and permissions that it had prior to being suspended. Um, so just a quick, I mean, just how we kick it off is a scheduler because this is just a task we're running daily because it's basically just going through all Okta accounts and it's looking for active accounts, just accounts that aren't suspended, aren't deactivated already, and then doing a for each and sending them to a helper flow that handles the actual filtering. Um, as mentioned, we have an attribute that we extended our Active Directory. We actually have multiple Active Directory domains, and we extended all of those with an attribute called SXM account type, because identifying what accounts are service accounts, admin accounts, user accounts, resource accounts, test accounts, all those things. We needed a way to label those, and we used this SXM account type as that means. Um, Activity was assessed based on three main attributes: the Okta last logon, the AD last logon timestamp, and the Okta created date. Um, so what we do in the helper flow is we compare the Okta last logon and the AD last logon timestamp. We use 104 days rather than 90 days. I know we call it 90 days, but we actually are doing 104 days because of Active Directory synchronization. So we wanted to allow a buffer to allow that we aren't, that we're getting the closest to the correct dates. So, uh, oh, and then for the 30 days, we're excluding accounts that were created within 30 days because we don't want to accidentally suspend an account that was maybe a new hire or a new account. So we have both days that are older than 104 days and days activity that's or created was less than 30 days or over 30 days, sorry. Um, and we're excluding service and resource accounts because we don't want to accidentally, it just wasn't in scope of this. We just didn't want to, potentially break an application that's running off of a service account. Our notification processes are 14 days before suspension for a standard user account. We notify the user. We're using Graph API for email notifications as well as Slack, the Slack integration with workflows. And for 7 days, we're sending the user and their manager a notification. 3 days, the manager and their manager's manager. 1 day, HR is also included. And the reason the managers, one, just to give them notification that their users, that one of their staff is going to be suspended, but also one of the use cases this has come up with is that maybe the manager has forgot to do their offboarding processes, and therefore they're just to make them aware that they're one of their staff members is going to be suspended. So for standard user accounts, we're doing a suspension, but the suspension also has a workflow that does um, for certain application groups, it's logging those into a table into within workflows, and that table has all the groups that they're associated with. Um, and the reason for that is the bottom bullet says for the unsuspension, it'll be able to restore that based on that table. So there's a helper flow that does a suspension, a helper flow that does unsuspension. So it just gives us that ability to restore them back to where they were. And then for admin and test accounts, they're fully deactivated because they are not the way we're utilizing Okta at SiriusXM is we're not actually assigning applications and things to those types of groups or types of accounts, admin and test. So yeah, as mentioned several times, probably all actions are logged within workflow tables, different types of tables, one for restoration, one for just logging information, one for alerting of particular values that are not found. The log for the entirety of the daily flow for suspension, things like that is converted to a CSV and then sent to Google Drive, and then a Slack message is actually sent to a Slack group, a Slack channel, sorry, that has a link to it in case HR or help desk or security or whomever needs to look at the logs and see what happened. So it just gives them an easier way rather than having to provide them Okta Workflows access to review the logs. Yeah, so as mentioned, and then obviously all those tables provide the capability for reactivation as well. So yeah, so the reason we chose workflows for this was it gave us the ability to reduce risk for manual errors. Obviously, it's a no-code solution that was fairly easy to for me. I did a lot of coding prior to joining this team, but it was fairly straightforward. Plus, it had multiple sources coming in, so it was a great way to kind of pull all that data together. And we wanted to make sure the communications were consistent across the board, and we wanted to make sure that we had an audit trail and reversible actions, and all of that was able to do within the workflows. So that's what we really appreciated about Okta and workflows. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick just overview briefly of the workflow, the helper flow that does the main actions. Actually, before that, though, I wanted to make a quick throwback to what Max said about templates, because one template you can use that's a good starting point that was actually probably, I would assume, based on looking at mine, is probably the baseline of how I created it. Is the identify inactive Okta users. It's pretty similar to what like the starting point that I worked off of. The only reason we couldn't use just that template was because we have to pull in Active Directory information as well, whereas the template just uses Okta's last logon dates. But that's a good starting point if you just need to get started with that. So for mine, the helper flow that does the actions, we're getting for each user, active user, we're getting we're getting today's date. I do conversions for all of my dates to make sure that they're pretty consistent across the board, easier for calculations. We're getting what we already have the information of the user being pulled in. I'm doing so one of the tables outside of necessarily the suspension or deactivation. One of the things we're doing is for the SXM account type, if that attribute is not found in Active Directory, we're sending a Opsgenie alert. And Opsgenie, if you know, like PagerDuty, Opsgenie are very similar in the sense that they send alerts to different systems. But this one is creating our Jira tickets. It's adding it to a table. It's sending us an email notification, basically saying that this user doesn't have that account, so it wasn't able to be processed, because we don't want to blindly just process an account without having that data point, whether it's a user or a service account or something of that nature. So that's what we're doing for SXM account type. Then we do a bunch of filtering, as mentioned. We filter certain domains. We filter based on types. We filter based on if they're a resource or service account, as you can see in the continue if right there. And then we're doing the comparison of 80 last logon timestamp versus Okta's last login, whichever is the most recent date. That's the one we're going to do the comparison of 104 days. So when we get that output, we then convert that, do a comparison of how close it is to the inactivity cutoff. We then also do the processing of the created date, making sure it's over 30 days, so we don't accidentally suspend a new user. So at that point, we have the most recent date, and we do a comparison. Is it 14, 7, 3, 1 day towards to the 104-day suspension or deactivation? And if it is in any of those, obviously we just do a else if statement. And we have the if activities timestamp equals any of those dates, disregard the 54, that was for a test environment. But if any of those, it will do. So we do for Graph API, you have to kind of do a HTML compose. So it sends the email notifications to the appropriate email addresses based on the 14.731 day configuration I mentioned earlier. So that's if it falls into the communication dates. If it actually is 104 days or over, then it does the logic of it kicks off. It adds a user to a group. I think we have a group called inactive users or something of that nature, and it sends them to the suspend helper flow, which I'm not going to show here, but essentially does the suspension and cleaning up of Okta groups. If it's a non-standard user account, then it just adds them to the group and just does a full deactivation. Afterwards, it's doing a pre and post change, um, adding the data to a table, basically stating what group were they a member of prior to the suspension and what's changed since then. So that way we have an audit log within the table. As mentioned before, that table is then sent to um, a Google Drive, and then the link is sent to help desk for review. So that's basically it. So I know there's a lot in this. So anybody feel free to reach out to me directly, but that's basically how we've accomplished inactivity at SiriusXM through Okta Workflows. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Andy. Thank you. All right, Dylan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan Barker, and this is Creative Techniques for Your Workflow Building Toolkit. I'm a security engineer at Stack Solutions, certified Okta consultant. We at Stack Solutions help clients transition to Okta from other identity platforms. In my time there, I've worked on about 10 or more major projects across different clients, and have spent a lot of time building workflows over those 3 years. I've built hundreds of workflows across those different clients for different use cases and learned a couple of things along the way, and I'm hoping to share those with you and hopefully teach you something. So I've got two different use cases. Going to spend a little bit more time on the first. It's a little more involved. And then in the interest of time, kind of fly through the second topic. So the first topic is pagination or recursion, and this involves dividing large data sets into smaller pages that are then retrieved incrementally. This helps with network load and kind of keeping things organized when you're using API. With Okta's API, kind of how this looks is if you have 1,000 users, Okta is only going to return 200 at a time. So you'll make an initial request, retrieve that first 200 users with any query parameters like search or anything else that you'd like to include in that user search, as well as a limit parameter of 200. I think that's the default, but just for demo purposes, I have that listed there. And the API will then return your users, obviously, and then a response header that contains a cursor. So then in a subsequent request, you can use that as an after parameter. You see that highlighted here, as well as your, any other query parameters that you included in the initial request, and then do that until you've returned all of your users. So if you already knew what pagination is, thanks for bearing with me. I'll jump into how this is used in workflows. So we had a client and their user directory was over 10 million users. So a lot of users. And we were tasked with generating a weekly tabular report of MFA adoption statistics. And what that looked like was having to return each user, read an attribute on that user profile, and then keep account of based on what that value was. And so initially we wanted to use just the out-of-the-box list users with search card, but found quickly that that was limited to 1 million users or 1 million records every 25 hours, which would be 10 and a half days for all of our users. That wasn't going to work for a weekly report. So we had to pivot and started testing pagination, came up with a looping workflow that handles the pagination by calling itself. Max has a video on YouTube that I used to get started with this. And within that workflow is the get call to retrieve your records, as well as other logic to pass those records to a helper flow to process them and do whatever you need to do with those records. I also added a maximum number of pages input. So you can input, say, 10 pages if you only wanted to return a subset of users. And that helped a lot with testing as well as batching, which I'll get into in a sec. But basically, as a result, we were able to obtain about 400,000 users per hour, which was about a little over 24 hours of processing speed. And it also gave us the flexibility from versus streaming that we were able to resume from a specific index if the flow aired or if we wanted to do batching. So say we only wanted to do 1 million per night, we could stop after 1 million and then resume the next day from that specific index. Whereas with streaming, it's kind of all or nothing. You can't really resume from a specific point. It's also not just limited to Okta API. You can use pagination and workflows for third-party connections or custom API, anything that you can configure in Okta Workflows, you can paginate with, as long as the API can handle it. So jumping into the demo, this is just an overview of the 4 workflows that I've built for demonstration purposes. It's kind of a watered down version of what I built for the client. There's a starting workflow, and this is mainly just to kick off the pagination. And you can specify a specific trigger that you want in this workflow, whether that's a schedule or helper flow, or you just want to run it manually. This is just a way to start the flow as well as input specific values that you want. So this starting flow then calls the pagination flow and begins the looping, where you're retrieving records and passing them to a helper flow or multiple helper flows, as I have in this demo. So I'll jump over to the console here, and I'm going to fly through this pretty quickly, but these flow files will be posted. So if you guys want to download them, I've made a lot of notes within the workflows so that you can, great timing there. So this is the starting workflow. Like I said, you can add a trigger here and then maximum pages. I'm just going to use 10 for demo purposes because I only have 10 users in my trial org. And then this next link is the response header, basically string that's returned if you want to start at any other index other than 0. So that flow then calls this main pagination handler workflow. And the keys here are this initial check on our maximum pages. So if we've reached the maximum number of pages, the flow will stop. If not, we'll just add 1 to this running page count, and this kind of keeps track of how many pages you've processed. Then we're going to build a relative URL. There's some logic here. This is not the only way to build this relative URL, but this is what I found works for Okta very well, Okta API. So on initial runs, just very simply adding the limit query parameter for this one and have the value as 1 since there's only 10 users in this environment. Each page is just going to have 1. And on subsequent runs, we have logic there to pull out that after query parameter. So using that link, we can call Okta and return our records and then pass those to a helper flow. And you have some options here as far as how you want to pass those records to a helper flow. For maximum efficiency, and this is how we got that 400,000 per hour, was using the asynchronous call flow. So this can pass records to a helper flow and can continue looping. Whereas with a synchronous call flow, it has to wait for the helper flow to finish processing before it can continue. So you can use the synchronous, but it'll just be a lot slower. And then here's a check on our response headers. So this link value is the response header that contains the after parameter, as well as rel equals next or rel equals self. Next indicates that there's more users to process. Self indicates the end of pagination. So this will stop the flow if you reach the end of pagination before that maximum pages check kicks in. And then last but not least is this other call flow async card. And this one has to be asynchronous or else the looping won't work. And we're just passing in our static max pages value, the new running page value that's increased by 1, as well as the next link response header from the previous API call. So I already ran this at the in-person event, so I'll just go into the execution history and point out a couple of things. So on the initial run, this one here, you can see the running page count going to 1, our simple user search with limit equal to 1, which will give us 1 user, passing those to a helper flow. Those helper flows aren't really doing anything right now, so I'm not going to go into those, but you can do whatever you need to do with those users within the helper flows. And then the important part is this next link value. You can see our rel equals next there, as well as this after cursor. And so that's passed to the next iteration. And this returns the next page of users. And these aren't loading. So I'll just go to the final one. If it loads. I don't know if it's going to load. So basically what I wanted to show in this one was the rel equals self, and that pagination was ended by this conditional check here. So like I said, this will be posted if you want to use this as a template. It's pretty basic, so you can build it around whatever your needs are. Back to the slideshow, I'll move into the next topic, which is delegated workflows with email API. I know I've started using delegated workflows a lot more at particular clients that have a lot of different type of contact center, different types of admins. And the problem was when we started to deploy these, we got a lot of escalations from those different admins with these error messages that they were seeing with the delegated workflows. So if you haven't run delegated workflows, you might not know what I'm talking about, but when you run a delegated workflow from the admin console, if you return or if you receive an error within the workflow, this is the only information you get. And like I said, this led to an increased volume of escalations, and we needed to figure something out so that those admins without access to the workflows console weren't constantly reaching out to workflows admins for help with this. So what I came up with was using the out of the box if error card, and to contain all of the workflow logic within the try portion, or the first try portion of that block. And if any of those blocks aired out, then the catch logic would kick in, and that contained an email API or an email compose, which would compose an email with various information with that error, and then send that email to whoever ran the workflow to try to give them a little bit more context. And as a result, we did see a fewer volume of escalations. A lot of the errors were bad inputs or, silly little things. So we did see a reduction in those escalations. And there's a screenshot of just a sample, email that you could send to those admins containing the execution ID, error code, error type, and error message. And I just mocked that up in with the help of ChatGPT. So I'm not an HTML expert. So it was pretty simple to make that. So don't be afraid of HTML. And I'll just run by this super fast here. So this is a delegated workflow that's assigning a t-shirt size to a user. The within this try catch or this try logic, I just put in kind of a manual check of the t-shirt size to make sure it's a valid size. If it's not a valid size, then I returned an error. And it's important to return an error here because that'll kick off the catch logic to actually send an email to the user. And then we have app action cards that you don't need to return if error card for app action cards because the errors will automatically kick off that catch logic. So in our catch logic, here's where I'm composing HTML. Not all email APIs use HTML. I know some use different things. So depending on what email API you have or decide to go with, it might be different than this. But just copied this into here and dragged our inputs into this body, and then read that Okta user that ran the workflow. That's what this value is. Got their email address, and then using Gmail's email API to send that email over. And this is important to return an error at the very end of this. Otherwise, it'll appear as if the delegated workflow was successful, but in reality, there was an error. So it's important to have this return error at the end of the block here. And yeah, here's an example of that return. If we had an invalid t-shirt size, there's an example, and invalid ID, here's an example of that. So this one automatically kicked off the logic. And I think I skipped over this, but just explained all of that. So to recap, with pagination, it's really helpful when working with a large number of users, but you can use it with any subset of users that you have, and any third party or custom API. Allows for more flexibility with batching and it being able to restart from a specific index, and it's more efficient than streaming, but definitely takes a little more setup time. There's also a recursion limit of 250, which I have a workaround for. I didn't get into that. It's a little more involved, but if you have more than, 50,000 users, then you'll need to implement that workaround. Then with delegated workflows with email API, it's useful when delegated admins don't have workflows console access and are running those delegated workflows on a regular basis. If you're receiving many escalations from those users, then this is pretty essential, or something similar with Slack or some kind of notification. All right, thanks for listening, and I'd love to connect with you, so feel free to jot my email down or look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat.
Cool. Thank you, Dylan.
Yep.
Hey, maybe so there's a question, and maybe we can just take it right now, so we don't lose it in the
Sure.
chat, and you can do replies in the Zoom webinar, but there is a question, and you should also see it, but I'll read it. So like, what is the use case for using a pagination flow? Wouldn't it be easier to use the Okta connector card, like list user with search and then stream all the users to a helper flow?
Right. Yeah, so I had the same thought, and what I found was it's great. List users with search is great for most applications, but if you have, millions and millions of users, that list users with search is going to take a lot longer. Like I said, it's limited to 1 million every 25 hours. So that can really add up if you get into the millions of users. So it's useful when you need to process the users a lot quicker if you have a lot of users, or if you're using, a third-party API that doesn't have the streaming option enabled. So a lot of third-party API might just be limited to, 200 users at a time when you're searching. So it's useful with those third parties as well.
Cool. Got it. Thank you. Thank you. And then also going to Andy, I know you responded to a question, but you the option to send the message to everyone was
I
turned
know,
off.
yeah.
Sorry.
I think Michele was able to send it out.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe quickly? So the question was like, how do you get the last date from Active Directory? Do
Yeah,
you quickly just want to yeah.
yeah, Michele also mentioned, and I showed, so he mentioned that you can add it to your profile editor for your directory. So basically, we're using, I just looked at it a second ago. Let me see, I still have it up. I don't have it up anymore. Um, Essentially in profile editor under the directory, we just take the last logon timestamp, and I also sent, and I think Michaela put that up in there, the expression language to convert it from the ISO formatting to a more usable date timestamp, and then that's being mapped into Okta then.
Got it. Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. Thank you. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, thank you.
everyone should be able now to send the message to everyone. So anyhow.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right, Michele.
All right, hi everyone. Yeah, I think we were replying between panelists and nobody was seeing the message.
I know. I think I learned something about Zoom webinars every time.
Yeah, no worries. All right, hi everyone. My name is Michele Ferrari. I'm a technical account manager, so I work in post sales with our premier customer to help them, reviewing the architecture and making sure they use the very best our product. So we're talking today about user password migration from legacy system. And we are specifically going to talk about inline hook, right? So more generic, when we talk about user migration, user migration from one system to another system, or legacy system to Okta or any other system to Okta. Okta accepts multiple hashing algorithm if you want to do an import of a password. Some of these are general cryptographic hashes like the SHA-256 or the 512 or the bcrypt or the PBKDF2, which are more secure and built more towards a password hashing algorithm. But in reality, what usually happens is that the system doesn't have that capability to export the hash, so you can't really use it, right? And this is very 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 common in the day-to-day use case we see and we help customer with. Many legacy system, they don't just expose the store password hash, or maybe they use a proprietary hashing scheme, or maybe they don't just allow the direct access to the credential store at all. So what we can do in this scenario? How can we help customer in this kind of scenario? Because we cannot do a simple bulk import of a password hash in Okta. And this is exactly where the password inline hooks comes into play, or we also import inline hooks. And it becomes extremely valuable because instead of exporting anything, Okta perform what we call the just-in-time password migration. So what you do, basically, you preload or synchronize the user account into Okta without their password. And then the user sign in for the first time. And Okta, it doesn't know what the password is, but it knows that it has to call the legacy system, which has to expose a function by API. So Okta is sending username and password to the API. And the API is going to do whatever it has to do to verify the password. And if the API responds back with a success, it means that the password was verified, so the password was right. And so what Okta does is basically, since he has password, because you type the password in Okta, is going to encrypt the password with the Okta password algorithm and store it in the UDR, so that from the next time when you will try to authenticate, we already have a password, so we can verify the password in Okta, and the user has been fully converted into an Okta user. Right. So, and this, I mean, we just need to call an API, and then you can have like a middleman service, which is going to make the call to the legacy system. A lot of our customers use Workflow to do that, because in Workflow you have a capability to expose the API. And now Workflow offers also the low latency, so there is no issues in in handling a lot of user authentication. It's also true that this process is not going to affect all the authentication you have, but just the user you configure for the migration. You can configure migration in batches. It doesn't have to be a lot of users at the same time. So I have a diagram here of how we have been using the password migration, especially like a professional service when you work with a customer to do migration. That's one of the diagram or the approach or architecture they used to do that. So initially, the import hook can only be used for new user, but we have like a feature flag in the backend that we can enable when we work with customer, which allow to set the import hook for existing user, right? So what usually we do when we have to do like especially Active Directory migration, password migration when talking from Active Directory to Okta, usually we configure like an utility Okta org, which is just an additional Okta org, and we configure the directory integration. We install the Okta AD agent on the domain controller. And the reason why we do this utility Okta org, because think about your main org is still using delegate authentication, right? And the utility Okta org basically it will use a delegate authentication, but it allow an option to expose the user verification by API, right? Because now that I set up a utility or I configure delegate authentication, I can go to the API endpoint and pass username and password. And when I do that, Okta will basically call the AD agent and verify a password to the domain controller or return a message to the utility or which will return a message to my inline hook if the password was right or not. So the utility org was just an additional piece that is basically put in place just to expose the capability to verify a password by API, so that we can set the user into the password migration. So we can set the password inline hook on the user. So and the flow will be the user try to authenticate to the main org. Okta doesn't know the password, but the user has been set in password inline hook, so it's going to call Workflow. Workflow is going to pass username and password to the other Okta org API, which will verify the user in Active Directory. As a result of the verification, the Workflow will return a success to the main Okta org, and the main Okta org will say, okay, so this is the password, so I'm going to save it. From now on, I'm going to I have a password to verify user. Right? As you see, very complicated. But that's what we have been doing to do Active Directory migration, and this is how we solve now. All of this just to introduce a new functionality that we recently released, which we called password migration from AD to Okta. Yeah, so we call this internally trickle migration. What it does basically allow a secure and phased password migration methods, which is very transparent to the end user, and we basically seamlessly move user pass from AD to Okta without all having the utility Okta or all the other piece architectural piece to do that. And while the migration is in process, we also have the reporting, so we can control how many users have been migrated and such. So if you're going to do like an Active Directory password migration into Okta, I really recommend to check out this new functionality that we have here. And the reason of this presentation is also, we have solved today password migration from Active Directory to Okta, but can we still use Inline Hook? Inline Hook is still cool. So yeah, there are other use cases where you can still use it, and this is what we're going to show you in the demo today. So you can use Inline Hook basically to import user password for any third-party system. Now we solve for Active Directory because that was one of the big asks from our customer, but nothing stops you to use it for other legacy system. In this demo is like a 3 steps. I'm doing this demo to demonstrate how we can use password inline hook to migrate the password from Enter ID into Okta. It's Enter ID today, but it can really be anything. So in the first step, I'm going to authenticate into Okta. Okta doesn't know the password of this user because today this user is federated and the Enter ID is the identity provider. So you will follow an IDP routing rule, which will say, oh, you're trying to authenticate with this user, is checking the UPN and the domain part of the UPN. And he knows that he has to redirect to the identity provider, which is Entra. So we redirect to the Entra provider, provide the password at the identity provider, and then returning an ID token which confirms that the user was able to authenticate. And Okta will create the user just because I have enabled just-in-time creation. But Okta doesn't know the password, right? Because it's a federated user, it's a social user. So what we're going to do after we created the user, we are going to enable the password hook. So that Okta knows that we have this capability that whenever a user is set for password import, he knows what the API he has to call, which will be our workflow. So from here, we are going to have a delegate flow, which allow us to tell which user we want to migrate, and you can use whatever our flow to decide which user are going to be migrated. Just for simplicity, I have exposed that with a delegated flow. So you're going to use delegated flow to tell what is the user you want to migrate. The workflow is going to change an attribute on the user. Because the power of the IDP routing is that you can use really whatever you want to decide where the user is going to be redirected. So the next time the user tries to log in, he will ask this attribute, which I call source of authority, equal Okta. So he knows that Okta doesn't have to redirect to Enter anymore, but Okta can take care of authentication. He's going to transform the user from social to Okta, so that the import inline hook can be set on the user, and then he's going to set the import inline hook to the user. So in step 3, which basically summarizes the final flow, the user authenticate into the main org. Okta doesn't have a password, but the IDP routing is looking at the attribute on the user, which says source of authority is Okta. So it's not going to redirect the user to Entra, but instead is going to fire the password line hook, calling the workflow. Workflow will collect the username and password and make another call to Enter ID, pass the username and password. Enter ID will respond with a success or an error. If it's a success, basically Okta knows that the password was right, and so it's going to save the password in Okta. And so from this time on, the user can authenticate directly in Okta because now Okta has the password, right? So this is basically how you can still use the inline hook to do the password import for any third-party system. In this demo, we are going to show the use of password inline hook to migrate user password from a third party. In this case, we're going to use Microsoft Enter ID into Okta. So this demo is divided in 3 steps. The first step, we're going to authenticate into an Okta application, and Okta doesn't know about this user, but he has a federation to Enter ID, so he knows looking at the domain name part of the UPN where he has to redirect the user to. So the user will be redirected to Enter ID. It will perform the authentication. As a result of that, we will return the token back to Okta, which will verify, validate, and everything to make sure it's coming from Enter ID, which he trusts. And as a result of that, it will create the user as a social user because Okta doesn't know the password. So every time the user has to authenticate into an Okta application, Okta will have to redirect to Enter ID for authentication. Now that we have a user creating Okta, which is a social user, what we're going to do, we're going to leverage the inline password hook to migrate the password from Enter ID into Okta. The way we do it, so with password hook, we can configure a user to be in password hook mode, which means when the user tries to authenticate, Okta is going to make a call to an API, and that API will do the authentication for the user and returning a success or an error depending if the user was able to authenticate or not. As a result of that, Okta knows that the password was right, was correct, even if it wasn't able to test it, directly. So from this time on, Okta can encrypt the password and store the password for any further verification. So from this time on, Okta will be able to authenticate the user directly in Okta without having to go to Entra ID or any other identity provider, and the password is fully migrated. So in the flow, I'm going to show you, I created a delegated flow so that we can select which user we want to migrate, right? You can use different way just for the simplicity of the demo. I use the delegated flow, passing the login name of the user I want to migrate. So what the flow will do will basically change the IDP routing. So it will tell Okta, hey, from this time on, don't redirect to Entra, just keep it in Okta because we're going to use password hook. It will configure the user in password hook, so transforming the user from social to Okta and then setting the user to import password hook. And the first step is basically the final demo. We will try to authenticate into Okta. Okta doesn't know the password, but is not redirecting to Enter because we changed the IDP routing based on an attribute on the user, which I call source of authority. It's going to call workflow. Workflow will collect username and password, which has been passed into the signing widget in Okta, and make a call to Entra ID. If Entra ID respond with success, it means the password was right, so Workflow will respond back to Okta, say success. And as a result of that, Okta will store the password and convert the user in a fully Okta user. So the next time user authenticate, Okta is capable to verify the password. In addition to that, we are going also to add this user to Office 365 application, which will have provisioning enabled for password synchronization. The reason we are doing that is because now that we have migrated the password from Entra to Okta, we also want a way to keep this password synchronized. And so every time the user will change the password in Okta, this Office 365 application will automatically synchronize the new password into Entra ID. So depending on where the user will go, if it is trying to log into an Okta application or into an Entra ID application, he can use the same password. So let's do the quick demo here now. So the one thing I want to show you is that I have an IDP identity provider, and I have a routing rules. Routing rule will say if the Okta has the user has a SOA, which is an attribute equal to Okta, keep it Okta, right? Which means that we don't have to redirect. If not, redirect to the OIDC identity provider I have here. It is doing the redirection based on the domain list on the login. So when I try to log into an application, I'm going to clear the cookie, just to make sure we have a fresh start. I'm going to log into an Okta application. I'm going to pass the username here. Next. As you see, I'm being redirected to the identity provider, which is Entra. I finish the authentication here. Okay, I need to do, there's a policy requiring me to do MFA in Entra. So let me do that. Okay. Now I'm signing in. It will issue the token back to Okta after I say skip. Okay, back to Okta, and now Okta is creating the user, right? You see, I'm able to access the application. So if you take a look at Okta and just querying for the username at the user API, we can see that the user is being created with a social because we don't know the password is a social user. Now I'm going to run the delegated workflow. So delegate workflow. I click the wrong things. Let me go workflow and delegate workflow. So I'm going to do migrate user. I just have to pass the username. And what this does basically is going to update the user, changing the attribute source of authority to Okta, so that the next time user tries to authenticate is not going to be redirected to Entra ID. He's resetting the password, not really setting a password, but just doing a reset. He converts the user from social to Okta, and then he's doing this custom API, which is basically the one which is setting the user for the password hook. right? That's the call you do. So, and then he's making some change in the group, his members, so we can keep track of if a user was migrated. So if we take another look to Postman, we pull the data on the user. You see that now the user is being set to in import, right? When the user is set to in import, what's happening is that next time the user authenticate, Okta will call the whatever hook is setting here as a password import hook. You can only have one. And this is basically telling Okta what he has to call to verify the password, which is the URL here. And this URL is exactly the URL which is exposed by this workflow, right? So when the next time we try to authenticate, username and password will be sent to this URL, which is a workflow. Workflow will collect username and password, compose a message, and it is going to send this into the token endpoint entry ID. If entry ID saved with a success, it means the password was correct, and so Okta can respond back to the inline hook, say password was verified, and 200 code, which tell Okta, okay, the password was right, so you can encrypt the password, and from this time on you have a password. You don't have to redirect to anybody. You can just verify the password. Okay, so we're going to do a test. I'm going to clear the cookie one more time. And then we're going to re-access the same application. And I go because I was trying to log in with my default user, which I have fastpass. So I'm going to go next. Okay, type username. Now, the password I type here, you see that we are in Okta, right? Because we have the SOA attribute. So the IDP routing is not kicking in. We stay in Okta. The password I type here is being sent to the inline hook. In fact, if you take a look at the execution history, you set this is exactly the password I send it. So you receive a password, you create the call, and you send this to the token endpoint into Entra, but the password was wrong, and so the flow was not complete, and the user was not able to the password was not able to migrate it. In fact, Okta say unable to sign in. Fine, let's now type the right password. I type the right password, the flow run, the verification will happening, the Entra will give a success, and as a result of that, I'm able to authenticate to my Okta application. If we pull the information from the user, you remember it was import before, now the user will show as Okta because now we have the password, right? So if we also take a look at the security log, so if we go to reporting and system log, you will see that import user password was completed. Okay, so we use the hook response was a success, and as a result of that, we imported the password. So from this time on, we are basically able to authenticate fully in Okta. So if I do a select all and search cookie select and remove, and we try to authenticate one more time, this time the password verification will happen at Okta. And I'm authenticated. If we take another look at the syslog here, you see that we have authentication user via MFA, password, and if you take a look here, you can see that the Okta credential provider was used, so basically Okta was able to authenticate. Now, as a result of my flow, I also added the user into a group, which is assigned to an application. And this application is an Office-ified application, which is configured for password synchronization, right? So in provisioning, I have sync user password, right? What does it mean? It means that, let's say now I'm here, logged into my Okta application. I'm going to go and reset the password for this user. And I need to set it up, Okta Verify. I'm going to set on my mobile. Okay. Continue. And then I'm going to my settings, security method, and then going to the password. Yes, reset password. I have to do MFA. Okay, here we go. Okay, reset the password. The password is now set. And since I reset the password, we take a look at the system log. You will see in a second. You refresh a couple of times. You see that there is a push user Okta password to application. So Okta detected that there was a password change and it pushed the password to Enter ID. All right. So if we take a look at Enter ID in the log, you will see that there was like a password update over here for this user here. And if you also take a look at the audit of this user, you will see that there was a reset of the password from the Okta Microsoft Graph client. So as a result of that, now the password is exactly in sync. So if I, for example, I go directly to the Office 365 application, so I'm going to remove all the cookie, and I'm going to go to, for example, my sign in. Well, now you have to trust me because you don't know what is my my second password, but I'm going to type the second password I just changed. And I'm basically able to log in because the password has been synchronized. So in this way, we are being able to migrate our user password from Enter ID directly to Okta. And also we also have a way to keep this password synchronized. So whenever the user will go to Okta or will go directly to Enter ID, he will be able to use exactly the same password. And thanks for watching. So this concludes the demo. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Michele. Thank you. So folks, I know there was an issue even copying text from the chat. So apparently there is a setting in Zoom that kind of allows copying text from a chat, which I wasn't aware. But anyhow, I know for the folks who wanted to copy the expression, the time conversion expression, there is a link at the, I put it in on the page with all the resources. So you can copy it from there. And I guess I'll enable the copying for next time. Cool. Akanksha, there's a question if you have like 30 seconds, if you want to jump about timeline for versioning.
We're still finalizing our roadmap for next year, so not right now, but can share that update once we have it.
Got it. Cool. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean we'll have something like this next year, and so yeah, we'll have more updates. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, we'll send a recording and resources, and thank you to all the speakers. You know, happy New Year, and you know we'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.